To understand how Iraq has changed in the last year, look to the southern city of Basra, the heart of Iraq's oil wealth. Earlier this month, the city held peaceful elections. Iraqis walk the streets freely, and there's a semblance of law and order. But last year at this time, Basra was in total chaos, run by warring Shiite factions, many of which were taking orders directly from across the border in Iran. Back then, Basra was the most dangerous city in Iraq, virtually cut off from all Western media. Residents of the city lived in fear for their lives, and we found out firsthand what that meant when in February of last year, one of our own, a producer working for 60 Minutes, was kidnapped. Tonight, we will show you how Basra was transformed, how our colleagues survived, and what lessons the city's transformation may hold for the future of Iraq.
My name is Richard Butler. I'm a freelance producer cameraman. I'm in Basra, and I'm asking the Iraqi government and the British government to help me get released.
This video was made by the gunmen who were holding Richard Butler some 3 weeks after he was kidnapped from his hotel room. Tell me what happened to you.
2:30 in the morning, police burst into the room with their fatigues on and their AK-47s.
How'd you know they were police?
They were wearing their police uniforms, and they took us away in police cars to a police station.
So there was no doubt in your mind?
Absolutely none. Most of them were hooded.
So that wasn't a good sign?
That's never a good sign, Lara. We both know that.
The police who kidnapped him, it turned out, were also militiamen. In fact, Iranian-backed Shiite militants had long taken over the Basra police force, even when the city was still under British control. Then, in the summer of 2007, when British forces withdrew from the city, dozens of militias, armed Shiite gangs, took full control of the streets. Large-scale attacks that had been aimed at British troops dropped dramatically, but instead of getting better, life for the people got worse. Basra became a city of fear and death. More than 100 women who didn't adhere to strict Islamic dress code ended up like this. Most Iraqis who were kidnapped never came back, and the bodies of 5 American hostages taken in Basra were recovered after Richard Butler was kidnapped along with his translator.
When they put plastic bags in our mouths and taped our mouths up.
That's pretty terrifying.
We had a bad feeling, and in fact, my interpreter said, you know, they're going to shoot us. And I thought he was probably right.
Did you think at that point, this could be it?
Yeah.
I might die?
Yeah. I thought, at that time, I actually thought that was probably going to be the outcome. Yeah.
Richard's translator was released within a few days, but Richard's fate was far more uncertain. He was moved at least 6 times to different locations, often tied up in the trunk of a car, hooded and shackled most of the time. Do you know who was holding you?
Not exactly. I actually was shown one Hezbollah propaganda video, and I heard the same soundtrack being played on their mobile phones as ringtones. So,
which indicated what to you?
Iran.
Because Iran supports Hezbollah?
Yeah.
The fact that Richard heard Hezbollah ringtones and Hezbollah operatives were inside Basra does not surprise me in the least.
At the time, Colonel Peter Mansour was the executive officer to America's top commander in Iraq.
Iran had penetrated southern Iraq, and it was very troubling.
Isn't it true in Basra there's a proxy fight, a proxy war of a kind going on?
Well, this proxy war that Iran is waging against the United States and Iraq has been going on for almost since the beginning of the war.
No one wanted to admit it at that time.
I don't think initially we realized how deep Iranian involvement was.
Nowhere was Iran more deeply involved than in Basra, Iraq's richest city. The militias it funded, trained, and armed were in control, and the U.S. decided something had to be done. Although a detailed U.S.-Iraqi battle plan was being worked out, Iraq's Prime Minister, Nouri al-Maliki, decided he wanted to launch the Basra incursion on his own.
Prime Minister Maliki very much wanted this to be an Iraqi planned, led, and executed operation.
Put an Iraqi face on it, have them be responsible.
Right.
So last March, the Prime Minister himself led around 30,000 Iraqi troops down to Basra, the first major Iraqi military mission since the US invasion, and a test of strength for the Iraqi army. By then, Richard Butler had been in captivity for nearly 2 months.
It sounded like World War III starting up.
At that time, you were the only Western journalist inside Basra. Describe for me what the battle around you was like.
Well, first of all, it was very sudden. It just exploded. I mean, it was just huge explosions started. Gunfire just erupted.
Could you feel it?
I could feel the shock waves of each mortar round being launched, and I could feel the shock wave of each Katyusha that they launched.
Like thousands of Iraqis, Richard was trapped in a city under siege. From the moment the fighting started, those areas of Basra particularly began running short of food and water, and did that affect you?
Yes, there was no food there to eat, so...
Nothing at all?
Very, very, very little, and it was pretty bad. I mean, my diet was 4 boiled eggs and a tangerine over a 12-day period.
Over 12 days?
Yeah.
The city was on the verge of a humanitarian crisis with no end in sight. The Iraqi army was unprepared to fight the well-armed militants, who quickly took the upper hand in the battle. What's more, at least 2,000 Iraqi soldiers deserted in sympathy with the militias. The Iraqis were desperate and turned to the US for help. 800 American soldiers joined the battle, along with US advisors. US bombers provided critical air support.
When I heard the American jets scream over the top, and then I heard the sickening sound of the house down the street being reduced to rubble, and that's when I really got worried.
When the bombs started falling?
Yeah, because there's nothing I could do about that.
The bombs missed the militia safe house where Richard was being kept. The US effort forced the militias to put down their arms, and they called for a ceasefire, sparing the Iraqi army a humiliating defeat. With the Iraqi army finally in control of Basra, images of militia leaders were slashed, a sign the people were happy they were no longer in charge. 2 weeks later, Iraqi soldiers stormed the house where Richard Butler was being held.
Told him I'm British hostage, and then the second soldier had said, "You're safe now, come with me, you're safe." And he pulled me through the door and down the corridor, and there was a lot of gunfire in the corridor. He was firing with his left hand up the staircase, down the corridor, and at the same time he's got his arm around me, almost lifting me off the ground to move down. I mean, my legs were so stiff, to suddenly need to move quickly.
Because you'd been tied up?
Yeah, and he took me out into the street and we hugged, and he was giving me cigarettes and packets of cigarettes, not one at a time, and then everybody started giving me cigarettes, and they're coming up and slapping me on the back and saying, "Good, Iraqi army, good," and thumbs up. And several people said to me, "This is the new Iraq," which was quite emotional.
Today, Basra is a different city. The markets are full. Women can once again walk the streets without fear of showing their faces. The waterfront is bustling with activity, all thanks to nearly 40,000 Iraqi troops who've remained on hand to enforce the peace, with the help of several thousand coalition combat troops and advisors. People in Basra now describe, a better sense of well-being and security. The markets are open. But how fragile is this peace?
Well, I think throughout Iraq, the peace is fragile.
But are you concerned about the fact that the militias haven't really gone anywhere? They still have access to their backers, their training and weapons support and financial support across the border inside Iran.
The ability of the Iraqi government to combat the militias and keep them from operating, keep them from dominating urban areas. These are the great issues facing Iraq going forward.
Is Basra the kind of blueprint for the rest of the country?
Well, I think in one crucial sense it is, and that is that it shows that Iraqi forces from all over Iraq can come together, can fight a successful battle against a fairly capable enemy, and prevail.
Since the Basra assault in the spring, Iraqi troops have recently taken over other hotspots throughout the country, where, like in Basra, a significant Iraqi troop presence is supported by U.S. advisors.
Historians will look back and see Basra as a turning point in this war, one in which the war goes from being more of a coalition effort to one of being more of an Iraqi effort.
What does that mean in terms of withdrawing troops? When, how fast, how many?
What it means is that we slowly withdraw our combat forces as Iraqi forces are able to take over the situation in various areas. But you allow the Iraqis to fight their war, and I think that is the way ahead.